Ladies and gentlemen, with CC9 update, we will get another joint operation banner. And it's one of the best joint operation banner we have so far. In joint operation, you can only get the 6 stars and 5 stars operators that are featured. And it shares the same party as the standard banner. Joint operation banners make it easier to obtain operators that are featured. But if you have many of the operators that are featured, it's going to be difficult if you want to obtain a specific one. And I only recommend you to pull if you at least don't have 3 of the 6 stars featured. If you don't have 2 or even 1, it's going to be a hell of a gamble. Unless you are also aiming for the operator's potential token. Okay, let's talk about the 6 stars. The 6 stars are Skadi, Kal'tsit, Exusiai and Mountain. All of them are highly recommended units to have, except Skadi. Skadi's role as a dreadnought that either holds a lane or heli drop is decent. Her S2 does some decent work of assassinating a certain enemy. And her S3 gives her massive stats. But nowadays her role is getting power creep by many other operators. So Skadi is not someone I would recommend to get, especially for a newbie. Right now Skadi is a mediocre 6 star. But with her module upgrade that should come soon enough, will make her more viable. With her first module she can further buff Abyssal Hunter's attack and max HP. Which is very useful if you have all Abyssal Hunters in your squad. Not to mention you don't have to deploy Skadi to use this buff. Her second module also improve her fast redeploy talent. At level 3 her redeployment time now is 40 seconds. Which is quite useful if you need her to ambush enemy multiple times. But just keep an eye on your deploy point. So yes, Skadi is mediocre, but her module upgrade will make her more viable. But keep in mind 6 star module upgrade is not something cheap. So prioritize a module upgrade that will really be useful for you. We'll discuss about module upgrade in a different video, but first moving on. Now, let's see Kal'tsit. The immutable one, the walking fossil, and Rhodes Island's big lady. Unlike other single target medics, Kal'tsit is very unique. She has a longer range and can summon monster anywhere on the ground tile. Monster got a big attack and offensive stats. And the ability to be deployed anywhere make it a versatile blocker and attacker. But if you deploy monster outside of Kal'tsit range, monster will lose all of its defense, so keep an eye on it. And monster can only be healed by Kal'tsit or using regeneration healing. And because of the game mechanism, Kal'tsit skill bar will only start charging when monster is on the field. Thankfully she got a low SP cost, and overall a great set of skills. Her skill 1 will increase monster's defense and Kal'tsit gain physical resist. While her skill 2 makes Kal'tsit increase her attack speed. And monster will gain an increased attack and will attack multiple enemies. Great for clearing waves and increasing Kal'tsit healing effectiveness. Last but not least, her skill 3. This skill will increase monster defense and attack, that will gradually decay. And each of monster attack will turn into true damage. One of the easiest ways to inflict true damage to the enemies. Certainly useful to fight a tough foe, or those who have physical and arts dodge. Although Kal'tsit and monster are great to fight enemies. But when talking about healing, Kal'tsit herself is not a very reliable healer. It's because for a single target medic she has a low healing output. And the only skill that boosts her healing is her S2. Not to mention her talent 1 will make her prioritize healing herself or monster. Although her longer range does make her stand out than another medic. Kal'tsit is pretty much a great operator for everyone. In early or later content of the game. But yes, don't rely on her for healing your operators. Now moving to my favorite myrtle buffer, Exusiai. She is one of the best marksman sniper in the game. Her talent 1 will make her normal attack faster than others. And her talent 2 increase her attack and max HP. And give the same effect to a random unit. Thanks to her skills that can deal a burst of multiple shots to the enemies. She can quickly clear waves of enemies, especially low defense targets. Her best skill is her skill 3, that shoots 5 times in a row. With a decreased attack interval, and each shot deals critical damage. And because of the nature of this skill, the buff potential of this skill is quite high. The only bad thing from this skill is it's an automatic skill. So if you don't manage the timing perfectly, she can activate her skill in a bad time. So perhaps you want to use her S2, which is a slightly weaker version of her S3, but it's more controllable. Exia is naturally a highly recommended operator to get. But for a newbie, in early chapters lower rarity marksman can do just fine. Although if you have Exia things certainly will get easier, as her E1 abilities are already good. Not to mention her buff potential to be used in later chapters and events. Lastly, we have Mountain. A solid lane holder with his S2 that gives him a permanent HP regeneration, and increasing his attack and block count. He will have his defense decreased, but most of the time it's not big a problem, as his HP regeneration will most likely keep him safe and self-sustain. With this skill he can hold a lane with small or medium waves of enemies. And the damage he dealt is quite awesome, especially if his talent 1 is triggered. And because of his cheap DP cost, you can deploy Mountain almost immediately. And then activate this skill also almost immediately. A 10 out of 10 lane holder skill. And if you want to make the most out of his damage and a bit of crowd control, then his skill 3 is just for you. This skill will slightly increasing his attack interval. But increasing his attacks hit 2 times, his talent 1 activation chance will increase. And each of his attack will push enemies away from his position. He is a strong operator in various content. Has cheap DP cost, good lane holder and survivability, making him a great and easy to use for newbie and veteran players. Now moving to the 5 stars. First let's see Lappland. Each of Lappy's attack can disable or silence the target, which is very useful if a certain enemies have that special ability, like the spiders in chapter 6 and below. And I'm sure most of you already know how useful she is in Stulta for an Arvis event. Lappy best skill is her skill 2, that increase her attack. Attack additional target, her attacks turns into arts damage. And her attack damage won't be reduced if attacking distant target. Certainly a useful operator to deal arts damage and silencing enemies. Next up we have Liskarm. Recently classified as Sentinel Defender. That can block 3 enemies and launch a ranged attack. And Liskarm is famous for having an SP battery talent 1. She got some arts resistance from her talent 2. Can block the next attack and increase her defense with her skill 1. And she can deal arts damage with her skill 2 and has a chance to stun the targets. But she will also be stunned once the skill ends. Liskarm got a useful support utility and offensive skill 2. But Sentinel Defender is not as durable as the other 5-star or 4-star defender. So a new players might want to choose a defensive oriented defender first, such as Protector or Guardian Defender. But later on you might want to build Liskarm for her SP battery utility. Next we got Provence. A heavy shooter sniper that can deal massive damage if her talent got triggered. Got a massive attack boost on her skill 2. That can damage or even kill a highly armored enemies. But she will only attack them if they have less than 80% HP. So you'd better partner her with other operators to meet the skill requirement. Next up we have FEater. A push stroker with a pretty strong physical attacks, pushes enemies in 2 holes. And can reduce enemy movement after she pushed the enemy. FEater has overall better utility than Shaw. So perhaps you want her to be the 5-star upgrade. Although Shaw does the job of pushing enemies just as fine in most cases. So newbie might be better off building Shaw first, who is cheaper to build. And think whether you need the 5-star upgrades or wait to get your hands on Weedy. Next up, Akafuyu. A good musher guard to duel an enemy or some bosses. Her skill 2 will increase her attack and reduce 50% current HP. Which for her archetype it's a good thing. And she also get 1 shield to block the next instance of attack. Overall a good dueler. Lastly, we have Tsukinogi, whose main usage is to apply shelter effect to allied units. But the HP requirements is incredibly low, so it's better to leave the medic to heal the injured unit. Her S1 can give a low percentage of physical and arts dodge to everyone in range, and reveals invisible enemies. Her skill 2 will make her heals turns into an AoE regeneration heal, increase the HP requirements of her talent, and increase the shelter effect. But overall it's still not effective to mitigate the damage from enemies. The healing amount is decent for her regeneration healing, but it has a short duration and big SP cost. Tsukinogi is overall underpowered and her buffs rarely make much of a difference, although her ability to reveal invisible enemy is quite useful, but probably not the most effective. Okay, now you have seen a little bit of the operator's abilities. You can check out my videos that specifically made to talk about the 6-star operators, but they are pretty outdated, so it might be not really a good review. But overall most of the operators that are featured are great and decent operators. If you don't have 3 of the 6 stars featured, I recommend you to pull this banner. Especially until January, there should be no highly recommended banner to gacha, although some upcoming standard banners might be a worthy banner to pull. That should be all. Adios.